W420radionetwork.com.
Well, thankfully, California is reopening. The world is reopening. The pandemic is subsiding in most of the USA, and travel is going to ramp up. And I guess when you think about California travel, it's from the beaches to the mountains, wine tasting, maybe a whale watching or the like. But what about the cannabis industry? We're here today with Brian Appelgarth, the founder of the International Cannabis Travel Association. And Brian, kind of counterintuitively, the cannabis travel world has been blowing up during the pandemic and maybe will continue to ascend even in the aftermath.
Yeah. The future's bright. It's an exciting new travel segment. And, I started in the space around 2015. And here we are in 2021. And it's going to be a very interesting year ahead for a whole bunch of reasons. There's the maturity of the concept of cannabis travel tourism and how that's going to integrate into really the travel industry at large. Everything from airports to rental car companies to hotels to comprehensive strategy for tourist destinations. How are we going to position this? Not to mention cannabis and hemp and CBD are inherently a tool for wellness and well-being, which is, as a standalone category of wellness, is the data shows that's going to be a segment that continues to grow, which cannabis and hemp are right kind of in the core of that.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the bud and breakfast is the old view of cannabis-friendly hotel destinations, but it's transcended that. We've gone beyond that, haven't we?
Yeah. And cannabis and hemp is really inclusive, right? So you have everything from people that are looking to the kind of curious that are looking to understand it more and how it can improve their quality of life, maybe even get them off some pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of kind of press around how they could potentially support in that way. And then you have people that maybe used back in or consumed cannabis more regularly back in college that are kind of re-entering it now, and they don't necessarily want to smoke anymore because they have kids, but the beverages and the edibles are really speaking to them. You have, chefs and cuisine really coming into play, which is a huge part of the travel kind of ecosystem, our restaurants. Yet again, there's just like so many ways. With bud and breakfast specifically, you've seen an evolution of kind of first mover and people who are adopting and raising their hand saying cannabis friendly here. And now we're kind of hitting a point where you see different types of models when it comes to cannabis integration in hotels and bed and breakfasts. Some are very cannabis forward, where they're catering specifically to the culture and the cannabis consumer. That is more of the connoisseur level, people that really appreciate kind of the cannabis lifestyle. And then you have other ones that are offering as light a lift as kind of a CBD massage in their spa. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the cannabis attraction for their property. One thing that thankfully more and more hotels and resorts are starting to do today is at least adopt kind of basic strategy and operations for their hotel, training their staff, having collateral concierge to educate visitors when they ask about it, just being more prepared for this travel segment that research has kind of identified.
Yeah, how about the demographics? Are you finding that for California, cannabis-friendly hotels and boutique places like we're here at Mine and Farm, a beautiful bed and breakfast in Guerneville, kind of the gateway to the Emerald Triangle, what kind of people predominantly are more likely to attend or visit places like this?
Yeah, well, like Mine and Farm, where we're sitting now, is a beautiful, I think it's 9 to 13 room bed and breakfast that's tucked in the Russian River, right? So it's already a tourist destination. It has been for decades. And what Mine and Farm have done is really integrated cannabis and hemp into their kind of offering to their guests, right? Where it's a very normalized experience. There's ashtrays available, and outside there's these beautifully stunning views where you can enjoy a pre-roll or drink a cannabis beverage in kind of nature, because private property, right? So they're really kind of adopting this and reaching this audience. The audience that we're seeing from this, as far as the Mine and Farm location, it's people from out of state, but also people coming up from the Bay Area, especially in the wake of COVID. People looking to get out of the urban centers, get up in nature where there's a bit more space. And nature is actually one of those kind of self-descriptors or self-identifiers that the cannabis motivated travel audience stated was, they really love they love nature experiences with cannabis. They also self-identify as wine enthusiasts and foodies. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be exciting to watch, and places like Mine and Farm are going to continue to evolve.
Mm-hmm. Now talk about the amalgamation, the food, the wine, the weed. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, they are all simpatico, but the law doesn't always allow for the consumption of cannabis with alcohol on the same premises. And explain a little bit about those distinctions.
Yeah. So when you get into cannabis retail, licensed cannabis retail and licensed cannabis consumption for the public, that's obviously part of the cannabis supply chain, and there's regulation and licensing around all that. If you are over 21, you're able to purchase and possess as well as gift cannabis to other adults that are 21 and up. When it comes down to kind of the trifecta you were talking about of food, wine, and cannabis, a lot of it's in the orchestration. Now, if you're having a private kind of gathering with friends, then that's something that if it's in the personal privacy of your own home, cannabis is legal to purchase and bring to your own home. And there's also cannabis infused olive oil. So if you decide to kind of use cannabis in cuisine or cook a dish, then you're it's more than compliant to be able to do that. Now, when you're doing it publicly, or people are purchasing a ticket, and you're promoting that consumption as part of that experience, that's where it gets on shaky ground and it's not compliant. And again, this will evolve. I think in the alcohol industry, we have, I want to say upwards of 100 plus different types of licenses. Cannabis is, I think, at 20 something at this point. So there's a lot more that are going to be coming. I know Desert Hot Springs and John Thatcher out there with Bubbling Wells is looking at events as well and really innovating and continuing to push Desert Hot Springs forward as he has. Right now in motion out there in the desert and Desert Hot Springs, there's a program spinning up that's all about kind of a guest day pass and being able to legally vend to hotels of boutique hotels in that area. And that's also a market that's really been on the forefront of lounges and shared consumption experiences as well.
Now, you say, as the founder of the International Cannabis Travel Association, what about the worldview?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So with that kind of global lens on, you see destinations like Barcelona kind of really innovating the space in this quasi-legal private club atmosphere. I think there's well over 100 now or more in Barcelona, which are these cannabis clubs. There's a couple guys that I know over there that have one of these, and it's interesting. It's kind of. Did you ever go to Utah when you had to get a membership to go in a bar to have a beer?
No, I haven't, but I know how restrictive it is.
Right. So I think of it as like, it's like the Utah model for alcohol, where you go and you buy a private membership to a club with annual dues, and then you have access to this club, right? So there's these different models that people are adopting from kind of the different alcohol landscapes, and Barcelona is really leading as far as kind of Europe. Of course, Amsterdam is still there. There's a little bit of a shakeup or some negotiation going on about how cannabis is going to exist going forward, but this has happened multiple times with Amsterdam, and I believe when they start looking at the revenue and economic impact and the visitor economy, they realize that cannabis is incredibly important for Amsterdam. I believe the statistics, if I recall correctly, it was 1 in 10 visitors to Amsterdam visit a cannabis coffee shop, 1 in 4 visit a coffee shop while they're on vacation, and 1 out of 10 will actually directly cite that is the reason why they came to the destination, which as travel looks at rebound, that's important to take into consideration.
Sure. I would think Portugal would be there too, having legalized most recreational drugs and the like, so cannabis would be front and center.
Yeah, no, Portugal is right in that forefront. There's innovation happening there. Of course, Amsterdam, Barcelona. I mean, I just a couple years ago went to an event in Prague where it was like a meeting of all these different kind of cannabis leaders across Europe. And, the hemp industry is taking off out there a bit quicker than it is here even, arguably, which I consider that cannabis-related travel as well. So that's everything from the way hemp is folding in is really in a way of sustainability, as well as, again, health and wellness and well-being, and CBD massage and CBD beverages derived from hemp and beyond.
Yeah. How about other states in the U.S.? We have 16 or 17 that recreational cannabis use is now legal. What about the hotel and travel industry related to their involvement with cannabis?
Yeah, great question. I've caught wind of a couple new cannabis tourism and travel dedicated organizations that have surfaced in the last couple months, which is awesome because the more people talking about this and shining a spotlight on this conversation and the convergence of these two industries, the cannabis industry and the travel industry, the more it's going to normalize. It's going to normalize quicker, right? So as far as states having a dedicated we kind of been the only organization really dedicated to travel. There's a lot of cannabis industry associations, cannabis chamber of commerces, which are really focused on supply chain. The two places we really overlap with organizations that are cannabis industry organizations is with consumption and retail. So kind of like, how can a visitor access this? Mm-hmm. And what is the experience? Is it safe? What are some enabling legislative moves that would really help empower the adoption into travel destinations? So yeah, I mean, it's jurisdiction by jurisdiction. We're hoping with the Cannabis Travel Association, our goal in 2022 is to be rolling out a chapter program, where we're going to be piloting one in California this year as kind of the West Coast chapter of the United States. And then we're looking at other markets like Vegas, absolutely, Florida, New York, Portland, Seattle, places where we have leaders out there that are part of our association already as members and really dedicated members that can lead kind of a chapter rollout. And then we can support them in our 3 pillars, which our 3 pillars are advocacy, education, and networking. And the Cannabis Travel Association is a 501c6 member-based organization, and you can find out more information at cannabistravel.association.org.
Right, and that means you're a nonprofit.
We're a nonprofit, yeah. We're a nonprofit in our 4th year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, what about party buses? I was reading about Canna Vines, the wine and weed tours, Oaktown Essential Cannabis Tours, LA Essential Cannabis Tours, the Cannabis Trail, where you can come up to, Northern California, historic and cultural sites where maybe you go back to the Humboldt High Five legacy growers.
Oh, yeah.
So you really take a deep dive into the history of it.
Yeah. So there's 2 things you kind of brought up there. One is cannabis tour operators, which are people that are guides that have a vehicle that take groups or private groups, and they take them on a cannabis experience of some sort. And those really vary. Everything from farm visits to more educational leaning, to retirement communities, to investors that want, a 3-day experience and they want to understand the industry and know how to deploy their dollars back where they live, right? So it's super interesting right now what kind of traffic these tour operators are getting, and each of them have kind of their own model. Now, when it comes down to the Cannabis Trail, that's something that I'm deeply familiar with because that's one of my projects. So the Cannabis Trail is a 501c3, also a nonprofit. And I've been working on that about 5 years. And that is a piece of cannabis, really tourism infrastructure for Northern California. It's a 9-county project. It goes from Santa Cruz up to the Emerald Triangle. And if you travel the trail when you visit Northern California, you'll come across cultural cannabis landmarks as well as cannabis monuments, right? So the landmarks really kind of signify, what was special about this place. Why is this part of the cannabis legalization movement, which is a Northern California story? The monuments are really to honor the major principles that came out of it. For example, the first monument on the Cannabis Trail is going to be unveiled in July this year, and it's in San Francisco, and it's in the Castro district, and it's all about compassionate cannabis and the role that cannabis played on the front lines of the AIDS epidemic to stimulate appetite and just kind of keep those stories alive, right? So people remember that cannabis is medicine, and cannabis really promotes your balance and wellness in your body. And that kind of epidemic is what set medical legalization in motion for California. Now, with the cultural landmarks, we're installing our first handful of landmarks this year, and this is years in the making, so this is super exciting. And this is really one of my pet projects. I love the Cannabis Trail. So the first 2 cultural landmarks that are going in next month, about a month from today, and they're going in Southern Humboldt. One of those is at Huckleberry Hill Farms, which is Johnny Casali. He's one of the Humboldt High Five, and really an amazing legacy cultivator who was kind of a casualty of the war on drugs, which is why that cultural landmark exists there, is to teach about the small Humboldt legacy farmer, and specifically Johnny's story. You know, he was in federal prison for 8 years. And
I interviewed him. I know. I know the tale.
Yeah. So.
Well, the positive messaging, kind of reversing the old paradigm and the old mis and disinformation campaign that was all too prevalent.
Right.
What would you suggest to bed and breakfast owners, small boutique hotel owners, in terms of becoming more cannabis friendly? What are some of the guideposts and suggestions that you would offer?
Yeah, well, I think so. One is just be prepared, right? So be able to confidently respond to visitors. And this is, I believe, if you're any hospitality facing business, specifically hotels, but really anybody that serves the visitor economy, that you should be able to communicate the very basic state laws of what is legal and isn't legal, and be able to direct visitors in a very friendly way and invite them to participate in the cannabis operators of your destination that do a great job for hospitality. So basically, be prepared to be able to respond to your visitors' requests and your guest requests. I would encourage even additional collateral or some kind of content piece where you can really teach people about the history of cannabis a little bit. You know, we live in a very unique window right now where cannabis has been illegal in the world, specifically the United States, but globally for less than 100 years. And if you actually look at, you know, even the foundational building blocks of the United States, and even kind of like the cradle of civilization, you know, cannabis has been there, and we have co-evolved with this plant. And there's so many different cultures around the world that have adapted and used this plant in a really unique way that shows how it can really balance mind, body, and spirit. It's a tool for wellness. And as travelers and visitors come and they're open to new experiences and they're outside of their comfort zone and they want to do something that they wouldn't do at home, a cannabis experience, there's many forms of that. That could be a dispensary 101 experience where you're simply going there because you know that dispensary is built for hospitality and they have partnered with hotels and they're ready to accept guests that just want to learn. Mm-hmm. And they might walk away with buying a CBD topical for the first time. Right. And they might use it that night, and it might bring a smile to their face because it's the first time they've done it, right? Sure. So there's those kind of visitors. So get prepared, look for partners, you know, have collateral. And I'd say even having a little bit of education or a coffee book that shows, you know, why cannabis is legal again and why it is medicine, and putting it in the context. For me, I really enjoy looking at timelines and understanding, you know, how small this window is where cannabis has been kind of illegal.
Well, again, we're changing the paradigm and you know, kind of shaking off the stigma of so nefarious and notorious an herb that it has been perceived in so many ways. But you're a great advocate, Brian. Super catching up with you. Brian Appelgarth, the founder of the International Cannabis Travel Association, here on the W420 Radio Network. We link your contact info there, and if you want to hear it again, it's the W420radionetwork.com/archive. I'm Rich Walkoff. Thanks for listening, and we'll be right back.
W420radionetwork.com